Right now, as you're watching this, something is happening on the trading floors in Chicago, New York, and Toronto that hasn't happened simultaneously in nearly 5 decades. Red everywhere. Not just one sector, not just tech, not just energy. Every single sector is bleeding. Manufacturing futures collapsed 9.3% in 11 minutes. But here's the number that should terrify you no matter which side of the border you live on. 600,000 jobs, American and Canadian combined, are now sitting on a negotiating table where nobody is negotiating because there is no table anymore. 47 minutes ago, the most important trade relationship on the planet blew up in less than 8 minutes. And the worst part, both sides are claiming victory, while the people who actually build cars, pump oil, and put food on their families' tables are about to pay for a fight they never asked for. Everyone online right now is picking teams. Team Trump, Team Carney. But nobody is asking the only question that matters. When two leaders turn your paycheck into a poker chip, does it really matter who has the better hand? If you work in manufacturing, energy, or auto, you need to subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Because what I'm about to break down in the next 20 minutes is not being reported anywhere else, and the situation is changing by the hour. The real story here is not who walked out of that room. It's who is quietly winning while America and Canada tear each other apart. And that answer is going to make you furious. Here is what we know happened inside that room, and I mean exactly what happened, because we now have confirmed accounts from both delegations, not just the Canadian side spinning their version, not just the White House damage control, both sides. And when you line up the two stories, the truth in the middle is uglier than either one wants to admit. 47 minutes ago, inside a secure conference room, 3 floors below the West Wing, President Trump walked in 14 minutes late. No apology. His team, Peter Navarro and Robert Lighthizer, flanked him on both sides. Trump did not sit down. He stood at the head of the table, pulled a single sheet of paper from a folder, and slid it across to Prime Minister Mark Carney. The document was titled Executive Tariff Framework Revision Proposal. It laid out a 34% blanket tariff on all Canadian steel, aluminum, and auto parts, unless Canada agreed to 3 conditions. First, dismantle the entire dairy supply management system within 90 days. Second, ban all Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers from using Canadian factories to access the American market. Third, and this is where it went off the rails, pay a $2.40 per truck border security fee to fund what Trump called the Northern Wall Initiative. Now here is where most people stopped the story. Carney looked at the paper, stood up, said Canada does not pay protection money, and walked out. And yes, that happened. But let me tell you what nobody is talking about. Those 3 demands did not come out of nowhere. American dairy farmers have been getting crushed by Canadian supply management for decades. That is a real grievance. Chinese electric vehicle companies are absolutely using Canada as a side door into the North American market. That is a real security concern, and the northern border does have real gaps in enforcement. These are legitimate issues, but here is the problem. You do not walk into a room 14 minutes late, refuse to sit down and hand your closest ally a document that reads like a ransom note, and then expect a productive conversation. Trump took 3 reasonable concerns and wrapped them in the most disrespectful package possible. And Carney, a former central banker who spent his career reading power plays across negotiating tables, did exactly what any game theory textbook would predict. He refused to legitimize the framing. He walked out. Both men made a calculated choice in that room, and both choices are about to cost millions of ordinary people an extraordinary amount of money. Let me show you the first receipt. Let us talk about the weapon everyone thinks Canada is holding, energy. And let me show you why it is not the ace card the headlines are making it out to be. It is a grenade, and both countries are holding it together with the pin already pulled. Here are the facts. Canada supplies 61% of the crude oil that flows into the Great Lakes region right now. That oil feeds refineries in Toledo, Detroit, and Chicago. Those refineries produce the gasoline and heating fuel that keeps Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Indiana running. If Canada announces a comprehensive review of energy export licenses, which is exactly what Carney's statement threatened, those refineries do not shut down overnight, but they start operating at reduced capacity within 3 weeks. And when refineries run below optimal throughput, the cost per gallon does not go up by pennies. It goes up by dollars. Some models are projecting $7 to $8 a gallon in the upper Midwest by late March if this standoff continues. Terrifying, right? That is the story everyone is running with. Canada has America by the throat. But here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Canada's oil sands, the vast majority of what flows south, have essentially one customer, the United States. The Trans Mountain pipeline expansion just came online, but its capacity is limited. The infrastructure to ship Canadian crude west to Asian markets or east to Europe does not exist at scale. It would take years and billions of dollars to build. So if Canada squeezes the energy tap to punish Washington, Alberta's oil revenue does not slow down gradually. It falls off a cliff. We are talking about $200 million a day in lost export revenue. The province of Alberta runs a deficit within weeks. Oil workers in Fort McMurray, the same blue-collar families that Carney claims to be protecting, start getting layoff notices before American gas prices even peak. This is not leverage. This is mutually assured economic destruction. Canada cannot weaponize oil without shooting itself in the chest. America cannot ignore the threat without risking an energy crisis across the industrial heartland. Both economies are so deeply fused at the energy level that pulling them apart does not hurt one side more than the other. It hurts both sides in different ways at different speeds with the same devastating result. And here is what makes it even worse. Every single day this standoff continues, energy futures contracts are absorbing the uncertainty, risk premiums are climbing. Even if no oil ever stops flowing, the mere threat is already making everything more expensive. Your heating bill is going up this month not because anyone turned off a pipeline, but because traders are pricing in the possibility that someone might. Now let me show you receipt number 2, and this one hits even harder. Let me explain something about how a car gets built in North America, because once you understand this, you will never look at this trade war the same way again. A single automobile assembled in the United States crosses the Canadian border an average of 7 times during production. Think about that. A transmission casing gets manufactured in Ohio, shipped to Ontario for precision machining, sent back to Michigan for assembly, returned to Canada for electronic integration, and then comes back to the United States for final installation. That is not inefficiency. That is the most optimized manufacturing system on the planet, built over 40 years of free trade agreements that both countries designed together. Now, Trump wants to slap a 34% tariff on every one of those crossings. The effective cost increase on a single vehicle is not 34%. When you compound it across 7 border crossings, the real number lands somewhere around 238%. No automaker on Earth can absorb that. Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis have all run the numbers internally. If this tariff takes effect, production lines in Dearborn, Lordstown, and Spring Hill start shutting down within 6 weeks. That is 420,000 American jobs with termination notices being drafted right now. But here is the part that the original story conveniently left out. Canada does not survive this either. Not even close. Windsor, Oshawa, and Oakville are home to assembly plants and parts manufacturers that exist for one reason and one reason only. They feed Detroit. If the American plants shut down, the Canadian plants have no customers. They go dark within days, not weeks. We are talking about 150,000 Canadian manufacturing jobs vanishing at the same speed. Add it up. 570,000 direct jobs across both countries gone. And that does not include the ripple. The parts suppliers, the trucking companies, the diners and gas stations and daycare centres that survive, because plant workers spend money in their communities. Economic models consistently show that every direct manufacturing job lost takes another 2.3 service sector jobs with it. Within 18 months, run that math across 570,000, and you are looking at close to 1.9 million jobs erased from the North American economy by the 2026 midterms. 1.9 million families wondering how they pay the mortgage, not because of a war, not because of a pandemic, because two men could not sit in a room and talk like adults. But the job losses are not even the scariest part of this story. Because while America and Canada are destroying each other, there is a third player who has not said a single word, and they are winning everything. While Washington and Ottawa are throwing grenades at each other across the border, there is a country 8,000 miles away that has not issued a single statement, not held a single press conference, and is quietly having the best week in its economic history. Beijing. Let me connect the dots because this is the part nobody in the mainstream media is touching. One of Trump's 3 demands was that Canada ban Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers from using Canadian factories as a backdoor into the American market. That sounds tough on China, right? It sounds like Trump is protecting American industry. But here is what actually happened the moment that meeting collapsed. Within hours of Carney's walkout, Bloomberg reported that BYD, China's largest electric vehicle manufacturer, activated a contingency plan that was already sitting on the shelf. They are not going through Canada anymore. They do not need to. They are building 3 new assembly plants in Mexico, where they face 0 tariffs under existing trade agreements that Trump himself failed to close the loopholes on back in 2019. The Canadian backdoor was never their only option. It was not even their best option. It was just the most convenient one. Trump slammed that door shut, and they walked through 2 others before the echo faded. But it gets worse. Remember that second part of Carney's statement, the part about rare earth supply chains. Canada holds some of the largest undeveloped rare earth deposits on the planet. These are the minerals that go into every electric vehicle battery, every smartphone, every fighter jet, every satellite. Right now, China controls roughly 80% of global rare earth processing. Canada was supposed to be the Western world's alternative. There were already joint ventures being discussed between Canadian mining companies and American defense contractors to reduce dependence on Chinese supply chains. Those conversations are now frozen. Every single one of them. Because no company is going to invest billions in a cross-border mineral supply chain when the 2 governments cannot even stay in the same room for 8 minutes. China does not need to outcompete the West on rare earths. They just need the West to keep fighting with itself. And that is exactly what is happening. Trump tried to contain China and instead handed them the single greatest strategic gift of the decade, a fractured North American alliance, a paralyzed supply chain, and 2 economies too busy bleeding to compete. Now I need you to hear something that no analyst on television is going to tell you, because this next part is not about markets or trade policy. It is about real people. I want you to forget about the stock tickers and the press conferences for a moment. I want you to think about 2 men who have never met each other, and never will, but whose lives are about to be destroyed by the same decision. The first man is named Mike. He is 53 years old. He has worked the assembly line at the Ford River Rouge complex in Dearborn, Michigan for 23 years. He makes $68,000 a year. His wife is a nurse at Beaumont Hospital. They have 2 kids, one in college and one about to graduate high school. Mike voted for Trump in 2024 because Trump looked him in the eye on television and said, "I will protect your job." Mike is not political. He does not care about tariffs or trade theory. He cares about making his mortgage payment on the 15th of every month. The second man is named Daniel. He is 49. He works at the Stellantis assembly plant in Windsor, Ontario, right across the river from Detroit. He can see the American skyline from the parking lot. He makes 71,000 Canadian dollars a year. His daughter just started an apprenticeship program. Daniel voted for Carney because Carney promised to stand up for Canadian workers and protect Canadian sovereignty. Right now, as you are watching this, both of their jobs are sitting on the same chopping block. Mike's plant cannot run without parts from Daniel's plant. Daniel's plant has no reason to exist without orders from Mike's plant. They are 2 halves of the same machine, separated by a river and a border that until last week was just a line on a map that trucks crossed without thinking twice. Neither of them was in that room. Neither of them was consulted. Neither of them had a vote on whether this negotiation should collapse. But both of them are going to bear the full weight of what happened in those 8 minutes. This is what trade wars actually look like. Not charts and percentages and clever quotes to reporters outside embassies. 2 men, Two families, same fear, different flags. And the question that keeps me up at night is simple. Do the people making these decisions even know that Mike and Daniel exist? Now let me show you where this goes from here, because the next 60 days will determine everything. There are three ways this ends. I have spent the last 12 hours talking to trade economists, former diplomats, and people inside both governments who are not authorized to speak publicly. Every single one of them agrees on one thing. There is no outcome where nobody gets hurt. The only question is how much damage and how permanent. Scenario A, the corporate coup. This is the most likely outcome, and I would put it at about 60% probability right now. Behind the scenes at this very moment, every major corporation with exposure to the Canadian market is making phone calls. The Chamber of Commerce, the Auto Alliance, the American Petroleum Institute, they are all on the line with Republican leadership telling them the same thing. If these tariffs go through, the economic fallout hands Congress to the Democrats in 2026. That is the only language that gets through. Not jobs, not families, not national interest. Electoral math. The pressure builds over the next 2 to 3 weeks until Trump has no choice but to send Lighthizer back to Ottawa with a face-saving compromise. Maybe Canada agrees to open a small portion of the dairy market. Maybe they announce a joint border security task force. Something symbolic enough for Trump to tweet huge win while quietly backing down from the cliff. Carney holds a press conference saying he protected Canadian sovereignty. Both sides claim victory. The tariffs never happen. The markets stabilise. But here is what does not recover. Trust. Every future negotiation between these two countries starts from a lower baseline. Every ally around the world files this away as evidence that American commitments have an expiration date. Scenario B. The death spiral. 25% probability, and climbing every hour, Trump stays silent. His ego will not let him be seen as the man who backed down after a Canadian Prime Minister walked out on him. So he signs the executive order. 34% on all Canadian goods, effective immediately. Carney does not retaliate with a dramatic oil cut-off. He is far too sophisticated for that. Instead, he announces new environmental review requirements for all cross-border energy infrastructure. Every pipeline, every transmission line, every utility connection needs to be recertified under updated climate standards. The reviews take a minimum of 18 months. The oil does not stop. It slows to a trickle. Energy prices explode. Inflation roars back past 8%. The Federal Reserve raises rates. The stock market enters a correction. By September, both countries are in a technical recession. The 2026 midterms become a referendum on economic destruction, and Trump spends his remaining 2 years governing a country that is poorer, angrier, and more divided than the day he took office. Scenario C, the realignment. I put this at 15%, but it is the one that should scare you the most because it is the only one that is permanent. Carney decides the United States under this administration is fundamentally unreliable and begins the long process of diversifying away from American dependence. New trade frameworks with the European Union, energy export negotiations with Japan, South Korea, and yes, China. It sounds dramatic, but the conversations have already started. However, and this is critical, anyone telling you Canada can just pivot to Asia overnight is lying to you. There is no pipeline infrastructure. There are no liquefied natural gas terminals at scale. This process takes 10 to 20 years, and during that transition, Canada's economy suffers enormously. This is not a clean escape. It is a painful, expensive divorce where both sides lose the house. Right now, I believe we are in scenario A. But every hour of silence from the White House pushes the needle closer to scenario B. And the longer this drags out, the more scenario C stops being theoretical and starts becoming inevitable. So where does that leave us right now, today, at this exact moment? It leaves us standing at the edge of something we have not seen in modern North American history. Two countries that share the longest undefended border on Earth, that built the most integrated economy the world has ever known, that have fought side by side in every major conflict for over a century, are now staring at each other across a negotiating table that no longer exists. And the tragedy is not that this happened. The tragedy is that it did not have to. There was a deal available. Both sides knew what it looked like. Modest dairy concessions, tighter electric vehicle rules, increased border security cooperation. The framework was sitting right there. All it required was two leaders willing to treat each other with a basic level of respect. Instead, one walked in with an ultimatum, and the other walked out with a threat. And now 1.9 million jobs are caught in the middle. This is not a test of trade policy. This is a test of whether the institutions we built over the last 80 years are strong enough to stop two egos from burning down everything that generations of workers, engineers, diplomats, and families spent their lives building together. I need you to do something right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell because this situation is going to break open in the next 72 hours. And when it does, you need to know what it means for your job, your gas bill, and your future before the mainstream media figures out how to spin it. Share this video with anyone who works in manufacturing, energy, or automotive. They deserve to know what is coming. The last time two allies tore apart an economic relationship this deep, the consequences lasted a decade and reshaped the global order. I am going to tell you that story in the next video. Do not miss it.